So, MetaShare, I will be talking about this open resource exchange infrastructure that we are designing in the framework of the MetaNet Network of Excellence for stimulating research and innovation. I will be presenting the mission and the principles, snapshot of the architecture, the MetaShare metadata model, some ideas about the legal framework in which it operates, and the way MetaShare is driving towards its first version. So, MetaNet, as was presented by Hans in the morning, comes into three pillars. The first is meta research, which was presented by Jan Heitsch. The second is MetaShare, which deals with laying, let's say, a data infrastructure to enable better research and innovation. And the third is MetaVision, that has to do with the preparation of the research, the strategic research agenda. MetaShare focuses on treatments of the known problems, gaps, and fragmentation that one comes face to face with when he tries to find data to train or evaluate his systems. So at the time that we were preparing, let's say, the design of the whole project, we realized that no matter what technology or application one intends to build, data is the first requirement. This was apparent in all MetaVision group meetings, no matter what the topic, the specific topic was, be it translation or media and information services or interaction. But then it was again the researchers but also the industrialists that told us that data collection, cleaning, annotation, curation, and maintenance is really a very costly business, ending up in acting as an entry barrier. And then we tried to gather examples from what other scientific domains do where data also play a crucial role, and there is substantial evidence, and people from the biotechnology sector or from the geodata sector, the geographical systems sector can prove it, that data, but also tools that operate on this data become valuable, especially valuable, when these are open and shared. And it is exactly this that MetaShare tries to do. MetaShare tries to treat these problems and fill in the gaps that are related to visibility, documentation, identification, availability, preservation, and interoperability in the area of the language resources domain. Language resources defined in a rather broad sense, whereby they encompass language data sets, but also basic language processing tools. We're fully aware that this is a very long-term process. So by what we do in MetaNet is to launch a rather long-term endeavor by which language resources are recognized as important assets that can boost research, technology, and innovation through 4 different dimensions of policy: wide availability, pooling, openness, and sharing. We designed MetaShare as an open, integrated, secure, and interoperable exchange infrastructure. In simple terms, as a marketplace where language data and tools can be documented, can be uploaded, can be stored in repositories, and then can be downloaded, exchanged, discussed, etc., aiming to support a data economy. By talking about a data economy here, we have to talk about free, but also for a fee, or to be exchanged data sets. All these, in their different incarnations of transaction, if you want, come into play in MetaShare. MetaShare is not alone. It builds on things that have been going on for quite some time, notable things. So we try to bring together several organizations and several initiatives. Most of them have already been mentioned today. It is implemented as a network of distributed repositories. And repositories can be either local, so I have my own repository, and each of you can have his own repository in his own organization, but also non-local repositories. In local repositories, we maintain the language resources that have been developed, used, and are currently curated by the specific organization. In case that this is not possible for whatever reason, we offer non-local repositories that can act as storage and documentation facilities for language resources of organizations that cannot set up their own repository for whatever reason, or for language resources that are donated, are orphan, etc. So the actual resources and their metadata, the description of the resources, reside in the local repositories. The rights of use and the related restrictions are under the control, the full control, and the full responsibility of the language resource owners and the repository where the specific language resource resides. Its repository, to be able to participate in the MetaShare network, has to undertake 3 distinct obligations. The first is to maintain an inventory, a local inventory, with all the metadata of the data sets and basic tools that they store in the repository. The second is to be able to export their metadata so that these metadata are harvested. Now, what happens to harvested metadata? Harvested metadata are stored in the MetaShare central servers, which are synchronized at all times. So, pictorially, the idea is that you have a whole world of distributed repositories, language resource repositories, each one coming with its own inventory. Then, through metadata harvesting, metadata are aggregated in MetaShare central inventories. And this is, if you want, the hard infrastructure. MetaShare central inventories, are synchronized at all times. Now, what can providers, users, aggregators, providers, consumers, and aggregators, our types of users do? They enter through the MetaShare portal, they register, they get authenticated, and they get an authorization to use particular types of resources depending on the legal rights with which these resources are associated. MetaShare then offers a class of services, so search and browsing, licensing, downloading, uploading, and downloading, statistics, how many times a certain thing has been used, by whom, for which purpose, etc. Mappings, we're not alone in this world, we have our own repositories, there are other guys that have their own repositories, so we try to map their catalogs onto the central inventories of MetaShare so that we have, if you want, a unique entry point. Reporting on types of use, but also reviews, people that have used this resource found it problematic in this and that feature, etc. Recommendation services, people that have used that particular resource have also used that particular tool to do that particular task. And of course, since we are operating in an environment where we aspire that everything will be open, shareable in the future, but this does not mean that it is necessarily free. There may be a small cost that is associated. Billing and payment services, automatic billing and payment services will be offered through MetaShare so that you can acquire the resources the same way you acquire your air ticket. As I said before, we will also be offering mapping services to map existing external repositories onto the MetaShare central inventories. Now, all this is enabled by a metadata model, or if you want to relies heavily on a metadata model that is not trying to reinvent the wheel. It builds on existing things. So the metadata model consists of, should be taken to mean descriptions of language resources, data and tools, and related objects. And by related objects here, one could think of reference documents, actors, activities, publications, etc. Metadata are structured into components, following what has been going on in the Clarin initiative. Components are used to group together elements and relations, but also other components. And the elements of these components, wherever this is possible, are linked to the ISOCAT data categories so that we're also enabling somehow, if you want, any type and level of semantic interoperability through ISO standardization. Metadata is also structured into profiles. So for each type of language resource, you can have a specific profile. You can have the profile for corpora, the profile for lexica, etc. The metadata schema is quite complex. We're not naive. We really know, because, I mean, we are describing our resources ourselves as well, so we know how tiring the whole thing is. So we distinguish the schema into two different versions. One is the minimal one, so a minimum set of obligatory elements and relations that are required for effective language resource search, identification, and retrieval, and a maximal one. Now, the upper level, suppose that you have a resource, and this is a model for the description of the resource. Whatever you see in orange is mandatory, and whatever you see in light yellow is recommended. So a resource, the description of a resource is structured in various components. So identification, contact, distribution, metadata, and content is mandatory information that we would like you, for the time being, you later on rather automatically, to fill in using the MetaShare tools, the tools that we provide through the platform. If we focus on the content component, here you have again mandatory or condition-based components. So the content of a resource has to be described with a full text description, but you also have to specify the resource type. The resource type can have a value, corpus, lexical conceptual resource, technology tool service, or language description. And depending on the type of the resource, you may be asked to fill in particular information concerning, for instance, if the resource type is corpus, you need to tell us if it is text, if it is audio, video, image, sensory motor, etc. If it is not, if it is a tool, you have to talk and describe a bit the media type compatibility, things with which the specific tool can interplay. If we focus further on the corpus info, the corpus, again, the description of a corpus is structured in various components. So you can have the text info, the audio info, the video info, the image info, the sensory motor info. There are quite complex resources that really demand all these components to be filled in so that one has a complete description. If we focus on the text info again is structured into components, where it is obligatory to tell the system, to give the system information about the linguality, whether it is monolingual or multilingual, parallel, comparable, etc. Say which language this resource treats, and talk about the size. How big is the corpus? How big is the lexicon? Many times, size is a criterion for resource suitability. Now,